Good morning. Have that it is time for our Bible study period to begin this morning. We'll be looking at the book of Leviticus again. Don't know if we'll get all the way through the intro and into chapter 1 or not, but that will be where we start. Before we do that, let's go to God in prayer. Our God and Father in heaven, we are thankful for this day, for this time in which we can come and study from your word. And as we do so, Father, we ask that we open our hearts and our minds to what you have revealed, that we might be strengthened, guided, and comforted by it, that we might in turn shine brighter in this world and bring your glory to many people. We ask, Father, for your continued blessings and care on this world, on us, on those who may be sick with the virus, on those who are scared and cause trouble by this current unrest in the country, that through your will and your way, men can be brought to peace. And we ask all these things through your Son's name. Amen. We had started to look now and been 2 class sessions on the introduction to Leviticus. It's a book where you have to do these things so that you know the stage of chapter 1. If we were to do it in the natural course, you would come straight out of Exodus into Leviticus, and a lot of the background and the things we're covering would already have been established when we were in those. But as we look at it, I want to get onto another one of the words that was important. The words obedience. Obedience. Things written in the Old Testament, as we've already established, Romans 15:4, written for our learning so we can learn from these examples. This is here for a reason. As we think about it then, one of the most important things that Leviticus teaches is obedience. It emphasizes how important it is to have strict obedience to God's law. For those who want to really be in fellowship with him in any case. It's clear for the Israelites, for them to have had fellowship with God, they would have to conform their lives to his law. In fact, staying here in the book of Leviticus, look at Leviticus chapter 8. Leviticus 8, and at verse 5, Moses records and says the following: "This is what the Lord commanded to be done." Now, if you go to the previous verse, how important is it that Moses thought obedience was? Well, if you go back to verse 4 there of chapter 8 says, "And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and the assembly was gathered together under the door of the tabernacle of the congregation." Then Moses is saying this next verse, "This is the thing which the Lord commanded to be done." Moses thought it was extremely important. And in fact, throughout Leviticus, Moses raises this idea of having to do as the Lord commanded over and over. You see it in Leviticus 8:9, Leviticus 8:13, 8:17, 8:21, 8:29. You see it in 9:10, 10:15. You see it in 8:34 through 36. You see it in 9:6. You see it in 9:15, 9:20. Over and over, how important then is obedience? Well, how important will obedience become? Not to go into detail of the chapter, but turn over to chapter 10 while you're there at Leviticus 8. Chapter 10, verses 1 and 2, and we'll go into depth when we get there. But it says, "And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer and put fire therein and put incense thereon and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out a fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord." Think about those young men, and we brought it up already as we've covered it. But these men, and I don't know their exact age when I say young men, but they were the sons of Aaron, priest in that right. They were doing basically exactly what they were told. They took a censer, the right thing. They put fire on it, a right thing. They put incense in it, a right thing. They took it to offer it before the Lord, but it wasn't a fire the Lord said to put on it. They knew they needed fire to burn the incense. They just grabbed some fire. I don't know, maybe it was from their own cook fire right outside their tent as they rushed to work one morning. It doesn't give us all this detail. But think about the picture. They assumed they were doing the right thing. But because of one little thing, not in exact obedience to God, it was wrong. So when people call something legalistic, the first thing we need to do is evaluate. Am I doing it because this is exactly what God said to do? Or have I turned something that God left wide open into something more restrictive? At that point, it would become legalistic. But if it's exactly what God said to do, there's no legalism involved. That's straight obedience. We need to understand that very principle. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the world today that don't want to practice obedience. And if you do, they call it legalistic. Well, it's going to be an outlandish example, but the table that's here behind me, if God had said every Sunday you come in and you wrap your head 3 times hard against that table, if you were to be in obedience to God, what would you have to do? Now, how many people would call that legalistic at that point? But if God said, I want you to come together on the first day of the week, which he does in the New Testament, can you come together at 9:30 as we are for Bible class? Can you be here at 10:30 for services? Or can we wait until, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon to have the service? What if we wanted to have the service at 6 a.m.? All of those would be fine. Why? Because God just said to come together on the first day of the week. That's the picture we get with obedience, doing it exactly the way God said. Where God left room, we leave room. Where God left no room, we can leave no room. And that's what Leviticus shows us on obedience. We've talked about it some, but to re-stress the idea of holiness for a moment, the importance of holiness that's seen in Leviticus. Leviticus 11:44, Leviticus 19:2, they give the same basic message. For I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, or set yourselves apart. And ye shall be holy, for I am holy. These words are here in Leviticus, and they weren't for only those living under that old covenant. If you turn over into the New Testament, if we go over into 1 Peter, 1 Peter 1, verses 15 and 16, Peter reiterates those words. It says there, but as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversations, because it is written, be ye holy, for I am holy. And so this idea of holiness is brought forward into the New Testament. The example coming out of Leviticus. The children of Israel in Leviticus chapter 10, we're told not to mingle the holy, that which is set apart, sanctified to God, with the unholy, that which would be godless or not what God wanted. In fact, notice how it is recorded in Leviticus 10, verses 8 through 11. It says here, and the Lord spake unto Aaron, saying, do not drink wine, nor strong drink, thou nor thy sons with thee, when ye go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, and that ye may put difference between holy and unholy, and between unclean and clean, and that ye may teach the children of Israel all the statutes which the Lord has spoken unto them by the hand of Moses. So God set up a way to help the children of Israel understand there is a difference between holy and unholy, clean and unclean, one or the other. There really is no other option, and you are to be holy. Why? Because your God is holy. And so we see that same thing brought forth into the new covenant. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 6. God tells us not to give that which is holy unto the dogs. Well, why? Because there's no appreciation of it for those who are unredeemed, who have no respect of God. God has called us in the New Testament to be different. In fact, look at 1 Peter 2:9. 1 Peter 2:9. As we think about the example of Leviticus, it says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. What's Leviticus about again? Those laws of how the priest operated. Now, he did it on behalf of the nation, but it's there. So we have a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Oh, this was the law of worship for their nation. Leviticus, doesn't it sound a lot like what Peter is saying again? But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And so we see this picture. The book of Leviticus admonishes the children of Israel to honor God's holy name and not to profane it, over in Leviticus 20, verse 3. One way God's name is dishonored, that it's profaned, is through false worship. Look at Nadab and Abihu. Think about that again. They're a prime example of insulting God and rebelling against his authority. God had told them exactly what to do. Oh, well, I'll do it this way. It's good enough. I've got fire. I've got incense. It's on a censer. It ought to be acceptable to God. God doesn't play it that way. So what does it mean to be holy, and how holy are we? And that is part of the picture. Another spot in Leviticus 16:33, we read of the holy sanctuary, the place that is set apart for God, which refers in this case to the tabernacle, God's dwelling place under that covenant. Today, God dwells in a sanctuary that is built without human hands. It's not human made. It is the church. And we see that in Acts 17:24, 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20. Reference, though, is made in Leviticus concerning also the holy garments, not only a holy place, but holy garments to be worn by Aaron and his sons. You see that in Leviticus 16, verse 4. Today, every Christian is part of that royal priesthood, as we've seen. Each one wears garments of purity, holiness, and righteousness. When someone's baptized, they put on Christ, Galatians 3:27. And so we see that picture of these holy garments. It was physical then, it's spiritual now, but it's just as important. God also commanded the children of Israel to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy in Exodus 28. This is reiterated when we get into Leviticus. In Leviticus 23:3, talking about this very thing, Leviticus says, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath. The Sabbath day was a holy day. It was a day set apart by God for the children of Israel. And I say that very clearly. It was given to the nation of Israel at Mount Sinai. Now, today, we're no longer under that Sabbath law. You can see here the picture of why some people try to say, oh, to the Sunday is the Christian Sabbath. Well, yeah, but nowhere does God command a day of rest on Sunday. Most of us use it that way. I'll tell you, I enjoy my Sunday afternoon naps. We get lucky, we get to do that. Nowhere does the Bible say it's a day of rest. It is a day of worship, just as you had worship in the Old Testament, you have worship in the New. It's a day set aside, and it's special to the Christian. It is the Lord's day. It is the first day of the week. Jesus came forth from the dead on this day in Matthew 28:1 and following. The Lord's Supper was instituted by Christ to be partaken on this day, Acts 20 and verse 7. And so we see the picture. There are things about obedience. And when God said to do certain things or not do certain things on the Sabbath day, then when God tells us about our worship in the New Testament, we ought to apply the same principle. Another thing Leviticus helps to teach, the seriousness of sin. That word sin. Those who have no respect for sacred and holy find themselves steeped in sin. They're going to be in the middle of it. Sin is serious. It's serious because it's transgression of God's law, as we would see in 1 John 3:4. It's serious because it separates God and man, Isaiah 59, 1 and 2. And it's not God that does the separating, it's man's iniquities. Man does the separating. God tries to reconcile and bring it back together. But sin is serious because all responsible people are guilty of having committed it. Romans 3:23. Sin is serious because of its penalty, death, Romans 6:23. And so we see this picture. We think about the law of Moses and Leviticus being a portion of that. Why was the law of Moses given? At least one of its purposes. Look at Galatians 3:19 and think about why we have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and even the other Old Testament books. Romans 15:4 told us as an example and a way of learning. Look what it says here. Wherefore then serveth the law, referring to the law of Moses. It was added because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. And it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. In other words, it's given through Moses. That's what we know. But the picture, why was it given? To help identify sin, because sin is serious. It has an extreme penalty, death. The opening chapters of Leviticus are going to speak of the sacrifices for sin. Why is there a need for sacrifice? Well, it goes with the seriousness of sin. You look at Hebrews 9:22, when the Hebrews writer begins to explain it, he says, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission of sins, in Hebrews 9:22. Without blood, without that life, without that death that goes with giving the blood, that's the life, then you get this picture. There's no forgiveness of sin. And so the student of Leviticus, as we look at it, we do not want to leave any doubt as to whether or not Jehovah deplored sexually immoral acts of any kind. When we read the book of Leviticus, we're going to see that adultery, fornication, bestiality, homosexuality, all those things are clearly depicted as heinous crimes in the sight of the Almighty God, and they're not to be left unpunished. In fact, those who are guilty shall surely be put to death, according to Leviticus chapter 20. You think about sins like thievery, swearing, oppression, injustice, gossip, covetousness, hatred. All these are met with divine retribution in Leviticus chapter 19. And so this idea, sin is serious, is highly present within the book. We also have then, because of the seriousness of sin, the need for sacrifice. God is holy, man is to be holy. Sin is an issue, it's a serious issue, and so sacrifice is needed. When man sinned in the garden, as we mentioned already as part of the introduction, the blood of animals was shed so that their skins might fully clothe the man and his wife, Adam and Eve. Under the patriarchy and Moses, the blood of animals was offered for the means of atonement or covering or paying for the sin. The laws that regulated these sacrifices under the Mosaic system are given here in the opening chapters of Leviticus. When we go through chapters 1 through about 7, we're going to see these. To give an example, though, the sin offering, chapter 4 and chapter 6, was offered for sins committed unconsciously or unintentionally. The trespass offering in chapter 5 was offered for transgressions where restitution, in other words, you knew you outright had sinned and there was a way to make payment for it. That's chapter 5. The greatest date in the Jewish calendar was the Day of Atonement in Leviticus chapter 16. It was on this day that the sins of the people were ceremonially, shall we say, rolled forward. Access to God then remained open for another year. And so it was a reminder of the time when full atonement could take place. Hebrews chapter 10, in describing this, says, Hebrews 10, 1 through 4, for the law, that would be the law of Moses, having a shadow of good things to come and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? because that the worshipers once purged should have had no more conscience of sin. But in those sacrifices there is a remembrance again made of sins every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. And so we see that picture looking forward to that perfect sacrifice of Christ to come. Every first day of the week, then, as we think about it as Christians, we honor the sacrifice made by the Lord on the cross. It happens when we remember his death by partaking of the Lord's Supper upon that first day of the week. That through his death, full atonement, full covering or payment of the sins is now offered. How powerful is that blood? And then I want to come back and make a couple of more comments on this idea of the Lord's Supper and what we see. But think about this. Romans 5, verses 8 through 11, tell us about the power of this blood versus the power of the blood of bulls and goats when you put it in contrast. It says, but God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more, being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And not only so, but we also joy in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom we have now received the atonement. That payment has been made. You go back and think about that time that we do. We often call it a celebration. Why? Because those sins, they're gone. They're no longer remembered. We come to remember his sacrifice. And you think about, and we'll look at it a little more probably on Wednesday night since we're starting to run out of time. But as you think about the tabernacle that's just been built at the end of Exodus, as Leviticus opens, where these sacrifices are to be made. One of the things that the priest had inside was that table of showbread. What does that seem to indicate and help us to see? It was located inside the holy place, which is representative of the church. Where is this place where we partake of that one loaf and that fruit of the vine? Within today's holy place, the church. And so we see a picture there, all these types beginning to stand on each other. One last prime thing, and then to go into the tabernacle, God and the people. They stood between God and man. When man sinned, man brought his sacrifice to the priest. The priest made the sacrifice upon that altar and then took some of the blood at times into even the most holy place on that day of atonement. The priest is the one who went before God. When we look to the New Testament, we have a high priest, Jesus the Christ, who came as God in the flesh, lived, died, has now ascended into heaven, and is acting as our mediator and intermediary even today. And so Christians are able to now know they have the promise of entering that holy of holies, heaven, through him, the high priest, who's acting in our behalf. Just as the Jew of that day could come to the door of the tabernacle, could send that offering, and the priest, having washed, could enter into the holy place. We see that same picture. The priest today, the Christian who's come through the sacrifice of Christ, has washed, is able to enter the holy place with that promise one day of being able to enter the place where even more holiness is, the Holy of Holies or heaven. And so we see that need of priesthood. In the couple of minutes we have left here, we've got about, it looks like about 6 minutes maybe. Let's look for a moment at just the picture of the tabernacle and start to get our mind wrapped around what's been done. As the book of Exodus closes, the tabernacle has been constructed. It's been set in place. And in fact, we're told at the end of chapter 40 that the cloud covered the tent of the congregation there in Exodus 40, verse 34. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So this tabernacle has been built. Want to notice some things as we think about it and put it together with the idea of worship. Number one, there is no way in which you came to worship God by accident. The slide that's displayed right now shows the tabernacle there in the center with its courtyard around it. And then around the sides of it, you see the different encampments. And you have it always set up, the door of the tabernacle, to face the east, as we would see in the drawing. You had then on the eastern side, the tribe of Judah and its associated tribes, Issachar and Zebulun. These were the three tribes along the eastern side of the tabernacle for camp. You had Moses and the priest right at the tabernacle entrance, and then you had the tribes of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Thinking about it, could you come by accident then to the tabernacle? Well, only if you could wander through 186,400 people by accident. That's how many people are camped on the eastern side of the tabernacle. You think, well, maybe they came around the northern side. You go to that northern side, you have the tribe of Merari, 6,200 Levites camped right up at the tabernacle. The tribes associated on the northern side, you have Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, 157,600 people. Did you come through that mass and get to the tabernacle by accident? Oh, you'd say, I come from the south, because that's always, one side that doesn't have very much on it. Well, you have the tribe of Kohath down there on the south. 8,600 Levites camped right up near the tabernacle. You then have three tribes, the tribes of Gad, Simeon, and Reuben. Gad, Simeon, and Reuben, 151,450. Well, you didn't come that direction by accident. If you're going to the tabernacle, you're going through some people. You say, oh, well, I came from the west and just snuck around the backside of the walls. Well, there's a tribe of Gershon, the children of Gershon, the Levites, 7,500 of them camped on the backside of the tabernacle. And if you're going to sneak around them, then you're either going to go through Merari, 6,200, or Kohath, 8,600. So there's not much there. But then there are three more tribes on the backside of the tabernacle over there. You have Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim, the smallest of the sides, and yet there's 108,100 people to go through to get to the tabernacle. The key being here, as we think about that picture of it, there was no way you got there by accident. What does the physical symbology also show us? Think about this physical symbol. You've taken 186,400 Jews on the east, 157,600 on the north, 151,450 on the south, 108,100 on the west, and you put the tabernacle where in the midst of their camp? Dead center. Where is God supposed to be in one's life? When they were traveling, the tabernacle, yes, was part of the column as it moved, but when they set up camp, physically, where was God? What does that tell us today? Where should God be in our lives? Do we set up our lives with them centered on God, with God being in the middle and there being no way around that? We see that picture here with how they set up the camp. Taking a little bit deeper look here at the tabernacle for a moment, and we'll finish this discussion Wednesday night because we only have a minute or so left. But thinking about this picture of the tabernacle, who could come into the courtyard? Well, the courtyard was the area that was really open to everyone. Now, most of them never went past what would be the main entrance of it, but there was really no restriction on who could enter the courtyard as long as they were of the Jewish nation. They would come there with their sacrifice. The sacrifice would be killed and burned upon that altar of burnt offering that's right there at the door. The priest, when they would go to work in the holy place now, having made sacrifices, would wash themselves at the laver and then enter into the holy place. That holy place having the table of showbread to the north, having the candlestick to the south, having an altar of incense right in front of the veil that separated it from the Holy of Holies. You see that picture. Who could enter there? Only the priest. And when you take that veil and you go into the Holy of Holies, that most holy place wherein the Ark of the Covenant was and the mercy seat on top of it, only the high priest could go in there. And so as we think about that, we'll look at some more at the tabernacle and its setup as we begin to go into chapter 1 of Leviticus and look at the actual sacrifices on Wednesday night. Thank you very much.